At the dawn of time, when the earth itself still breathed the warmth of creation, and the skies were a bottomless blue, endless plains stretched out. The waters of the great rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates, flowed across them like ghostly rivers, lapping the banks where life was born. Here, under the scorching sun, amid golden ears of grain and dust, humanity took its first steps. The air was thick and hot, filled with the scent of grass, earth, and something elusive, a precursor to great achievements. At such moments, when the sun rose above the horizon, painting the sky in delicate shades of pink and orange, it seemed the entire world stood still in anticipation. What drew these people, living at the foot of the world, to the heavens? What compelled them to raise their gaze to the shimmering points in the night abyss? Was it a thirst to comprehend the incomprehensible, a desire to approach what seemed unattainable, or was it a call of the soul itself, a yearning for something higher than this earthly veil? In these boundless spaces, where the only landmarks were the movement of the stars and the flow of the rivers, the first civilizations arose. Their worlds were filled with gods, spirits dwelling in the winds, in the waters, in the sun itself, which gave life and could take it. They gazed at the sky with awe and reverence. It was the source of light, warmth, and moisture, but also of terrible storms and merciless drought. Understanding these forces, the desire to reconcile with them, to find their place in this grand, incomprehensible order of things, all this became the driving force behind their aspirations. On a plain devoid of high mountains and rocky cliffs, the natural desire was to create their own hill, their own elevated spot from which to gaze closer to the stars, and they began to build. At first they were simple earthen mounds, then structures of clay mixed with straw, dried in the sun. They were simple, but they already embodied a dream of ascension, of transcending earthly boundaries. Each step, each new tier erected by their hands was a step toward heaven, a step filled with hope, faith, and a quiet but persistent desire to be closer to the gods, to the source of all existence. This dawn of history, illuminated by the first rays of the rising sun, was a time of the birth of great ideas that forever changed the course of human thought. The breath of clay and light. This is how one might describe the birth of the idea that would elevate man above the plains, above earthly vanity. This was not simply a construction project. It was a path paved with faith and clay, illuminated by heavenly fire. Where the horizon seemed endless, where the sky merged with the earth in a single, silent symphony, people felt their smallness. But within this smallness lay an immense power, the power of the desire to understand, the yearning for dialogue with those who, they believed, ruled the world from above. The ziggurat was unlike the temples built in other lands. It was neither a cave sheltering from the elements, nor a modest sanctuary lost in the forest. It was open to the sky, yet firmly rooted in the earth. Its stepped form was more than just an architectural design. It was a metaphor, a symbol. Each terrace, each step, was a step extended toward the gods. It was a staircase, as the ancients believed, along which souls could ascend and descend, connecting two worlds, the earthly world, full of cares and labor, and the heavenly world, the abode of divine wisdom and power. The choice of location for such a structure was no accident. On the vast plains of Mesopotamia, where there were no mountains to reach the heavens, where the wind swept freely, unhindered, the plain became the canvas for grand designs. On this flat, yielding surface, where the stars served as the only guide, the ziggurat was to become a new center of the world, a new point of attraction. Its base, firmly rooted in the earth, symbolized strength and stability, while its soaring tiers represented a striving for the spiritual. It was a bridge between the visible and the invisible, between humanity and the divine. This path to heaven began with a simple yet profound decision: to build from what the earth provided, clay. Raw and malleable, it became brick, the foundation for greatness. Dried in the sun, it acquired a hardness ready to withstand time. As the centuries passed, these adobe structures grew ever more grandiose. Their forms changed, their heights grew, but the essence remained the same: to ascend, to rise above the ordinary, to feel closer to the stars, to those who, it was believed, sent rain and harvest, who guided the course of life. A new chapter in the ancient world opens before us. The breath of clay and light, the birth of the idea of the ziggurat. It was more than just a stone monster towering over the city. It was a heart pulsing with faith. It was a home for the gods, where they could dwell, observing their creations. And at the same time, it was a home for people, a place where they could offer gifts, seek solace and wisdom. Every step, every ledge, every terrace, everything was filled with meaning. Everything spoke of the connection between worlds. The symbolism of the stepped form was clear to everyone. It was a staircase to heaven where the gods dwelt, where the spirits of ancestors lived, where the stars resided. Climbing these steps, one seemed to shorten the distance to the divine, feeling part of something greater. Each new terrace was a step toward enlightenment, toward understanding the mysteries of the universe. It was a path that required effort, but the reward was a sense of closeness to higher powers. It was on this plane, in the heart of the lands that would later be called Mesopotamia, that this idea was born. Here, where the horizon seemed limitless, where the sky was the most luminous spectacle, man felt the need for verticality, the need to rise, to build his own hill, his own mountain, which would soar upward. It was a natural extension of the yearning for the stars, for light, for the unknown. At first, these were modest mounds, then massive structures of mud brick. Clay mixed with straw, dried in the sun, became the building material. It was readily available, plentiful, and from it, step by step, walls rose, tiers grew. It was a long, painstaking labor, but it was filled with profound meaning. Each new step was another step toward the gods, another testimony of human faith. The light of day playing on the clay walls and the light of night reflecting in the starry sky, all merged into a single image. The ziggurat was meant to be a link between these two worlds. It was a beacon of faith, a guide for the soul. Its form, its location, its purpose, everything was subordinated to this central idea: to unite earth and heaven, man and the divine. And this path, which began with the first clay structures, continued, becoming ever more complex and majestic. The city, like a living being, breathed. Its heart beat in unison with the invisible rhythm of faith, and this rhythm emanated from the ziggurat. Majestic and multi-tiered, it towered above the tiled roofs, above the narrow streets, above the bustle of everyday life. Each of its terraces, each step, seemed inscribed in the cosmos itself. The material was mud brick, dried by the scorching sun and then fired in kilns to become stronger and more durable. It was warm, earthy, preserving the memory of the clay from which it was created. The ziggurat's height was astounding. It soared toward the sky like a gigantic staircase woven from stone and light. Its dimensions were colossal. Thousands of hands labored under the scorching sun to build such structures. Every stone, every block of clay was laid with prayer, with hope, with trepidation. The layout was simple and ingenious, a series of platforms, one above the other, tapering toward the top. On the very top, hidden from the eyes of mere mortals, was a sanctuary. This was the home of the gods, their abode on earth. The ziggurat was more than just a building. It was a living organism, the center of everything. Here, in its shadow, the city's life boiled. Here destinies were decided, here hopes were born and died. People came here at dawn, when the first rays of the sun touched its peaks and left at sunset, when the last glow faded into the distance. It was a place of power, a place where people felt their connection to the divine. Rituals and holidays imbued community life with meaning. Each day was marked by prayers, sacrifices, and chants. Priests dressed in special robes served as intermediaries between the worlds. They performed complex ceremonies, brought offerings to the gods, and asked for mercy, rain, a good harvest, and victory in war. The celebrations were noisy, vibrant, filled with music, dancing, and feasting. They united people, strengthened community spirit, and reminded them that they were not alone in this world, and that they were protected by higher powers. As the sun rose high above the horizon, its rays bathed the ziggurat's terraces in golden light. The shadows lengthened, creating intricate patterns on the clay walls. The wind, carrying the scent of herbs and dust from the plain, rustled the steps as if whispering ancient secrets. On the upper platform, where the sanctuary stood, the air was thin and pure. Here, among the clouds, the priests performed their most sacred rituals, addressing the gods with prayers and thanksgiving. Life around the ziggurat was subordinated to its rhythm. Mornings began with birdsong and the first prayers. The day was filled with work, trade, and socializing. Evening brought peace and reflection. At night, when the sky was strewn with myriad stars, the ziggurat became even more mysterious and majestic. It seemed to be part of the firmament itself, a bridge between the earthly and the stellar. The ziggurat's magnitude was not only in its physical size, but also in its human significance. It was a symbol of stability, order, and unity. It united the past, present, and future. It recalled the power of faith, the might of the gods, and the human quest for perfection. Its stepped form was more than just an architectural design. It held profound symbolism. Each terrace represented a new stage of spiritual growth, a step toward enlightenment, toward understanding the mysteries of the universe. It was a journey that required effort, but the reward was a sense of closeness to higher powers. The city, like a pulsating heart, beat around this stone giant. Its breath was rhythmic, calm, filled with anticipation. The city's inhabitants knew that their lives were inextricably linked to this place. Here they found solace in sorrow, joy in happiness, hope in despair. The ziggurat was the keeper of their faith, their hopes, their destinies. It was the center of their world, their connection to the gods, their aspiration to heaven. Its greatness lay not only in its power, but also in its ability to unite people, inspire them, and give them meaning. Every step, every brick, seemed imbued with this faith, this hope, this aspiration for the highest. And this greatness, frozen in stone, continued to live in the hearts of people, passed down from generation to generation, reminding them of their connection to the divine of their eternal striving for heaven, its walls as if alive, absorbed sunlight by day and reflected starlight at night. It stood, unshakable as eternity itself, a symbol of the unbreakable bond between earth and heaven. Every step up its steps was a step toward the gods, toward their wisdom, toward their power. This wasn't just construction. It was an act of faith, an act of hope, an act of love for the Supreme Being. And this love, this faith, this hope, like invisible threads, connected the city to its heavenly patron, making the ziggurat not just a structure but a living pulse of faith, beating at the very heart of civilization. A profound tranquility enveloped the place as the sun began to sink toward the horizon. Long shadows stretched across the land, and the sky turned shades of pink and gold. At this hour, the ziggurat became even more majestic, its silhouette clearly outlined against the sunset. People returning from the fields and workshops stopped to gaze upon it, to feel its power, its peace. It was a time of reflection, a time of gratitude, a time when the city and its heavenly guardian merged into a single, harmonious image. Ancient stones held the stories of centuries, stories of birth, life and death, of joys and sorrows, victories and defeats. But most importantly, they preserved the memory of faith, of man striving for the highest, of his eternal search for meaning. The ziggurat was more than just a temple. It was a mirror of the human soul, reflecting its deepest desires and aspirations. And in this reflection, in this connection with eternity, lay its true greatness, a greatness that has endured millennia and continues to stir our hearts to this day. In the shadow of the gods, where every stone held the breath of eternity, lived those who served as a bridge between worlds, the priests. Their world was woven from mysteries, from the whispers of the stars and clay tablets inscribed with symbols understandable only to a select few. They were the keepers of a knowledge that carried not only the wisdom of the past, but also the key to the future. In their hands rested the fate of kingdoms, for it was they, the priests, who interpreted the will of the gods, revealing it to humanity through omens and rituals. Their lives were steeped in mysticism. Every sunrise, every lunar phase, every flight of a bird, everything had significance. The celestial bodies were especially significant. The ziggurat, this stepped mountain of clay and brick, was more than just a temple. It was an observatory, a gigantic instrument with which the priests observed the dance of the stars. They spent entire nights at its summit, beneath a vast dome studded with diamonds. Their eyes, accustomed to the dim light, peered into the twinkling constellations, searching for signs. The movement of celestial bodies was a sacred language for them. They believed that the position of the planets at the moment of a person's birth predetermined their destiny. Each constellation, each luminous orb in the sky, possessed its own energy, its own influence. The priests recorded their observations on clay tablets, creating star charts that served as their guide. They saw the sky as a reflection of earthly events, and earthly events as confirmation of celestial patterns. The priests' prophecies weren't simply a matter of chance. They were the result of painstaking work, deep study, and an intuitive understanding of hidden connections. These predictions could influence a king's decision to wage war or make peace, the outcome of the sowing season, and the well-being of the entire people. Fear of the gods' wrath or hope for their mercy compelled rulers and commoners alike to heed the priests' every word. Their secrets, their knowledge were a force that shaped the world, They were intermediaries between the divine and the human. When disaster befell the city, drought, epidemic, or enemy invasion, it was the priests who turned to the gods with prayers and sacrifices. They knew how to appease the angry and restore the favor of their heavenly patrons. Their rituals were complex and multi-staged, filled with symbolism understood only by them. The aroma of incense mingled with the smoke of the sacrificial fire, creating an atmosphere of sacred awe. Inside the temples, in secret sanctuaries, the priests performed their rituals, access to which was strictly restricted. Here, in the semi-darkness, illuminated only by the flickering of lamps, they addressed their gods directly, without intermediaries. They were credited with the ability to communicate with spirits, foresee the future, and heal illnesses. This aura of mystery surrounded them, making them figures both revered and somewhat terrifying. They were not just priests, but also the scholars of their time. Their knowledge of mathematics, astronomy, and medicine was advanced for the era. They knew how to calculate the cycles of the sun and moon, predict eclipses, and construct complex engineering structures. All this knowledge was inextricably linked with their faith, with their service to the gods. For them, science and religion were two sides of the same coin, two ways of understanding the world created by higher powers. As the sun began its journey toward its zenith, its rays, piercing the dusty air, illuminated the peaks of the ziggurats. At these hours, the priests, having completed their nightly vigil, descended, carrying within them echoes of heavenly revelations. Their faces, illuminated by an inner light, seemed wise and slightly detached. They were those who saw farther, who heard deeper, who lived on the border between two worlds. They understood that the world was full of mysteries, and that the human mind could only comprehend a small fraction of them. Therefore they learned humility in the face of the unknown, but at the same time they strove to expand the boundaries of their knowledge. Each new day brought them new questions, new riddles which they solved with persistence and dedication. Their lives were dedicated to service, knowledge, and maintaining the delicate balance between humans and gods. They studied herbs to treat illnesses, knew how to predict the weather by observing animal behavior, and were able to create complex calendars to help manage agricultural work. Their wisdom was practical, but it was rooted in profound spiritual experiences. They saw every manifestation of nature as a reflection of divine will, and they strove to live in harmony with that will. The noise of city life, the bustle of bazaars, the laughter of children, all this remained somewhere below, far from their secluded sanctuaries. At the top of the ziggurat, under the open sky, time flowed differently. It was measured not by hours, but by the movement of celestial bodies, not by days, but by the passage of eras. The priests lived in this eternal present, absorbing the wisdom of the ages and passing it on to future generations. Their secrets were not just secrets, but part of a great mosaic of the universe that they sought to unravel. It was here, on this ancient land, where rivers wove their threads of life and the sky seemed a bottomless dome, that ambitions were born that reached to the stars. Humanity, having broken free from the primordial dampness of caves, acquired the ability to dream, to create, and, most importantly, to strive upward. It was an era when clay became brick, and brick a stepping stone to greatness. Ziggurats, these monumental towers soaring toward the heavens, became the visible embodiment of this daring aspiration. They were not just structures, but living organisms, pulsating to the rhythm of the city, reflecting the faith and power of their creators. Against the backdrop of a vast plain where the horizon merged with the sky, these stepped masses rose like gigantic staircases leading to the abode of the gods. Their shapes were no accident. They carried profound symbolism. Each step, each ledge, was part of a journey, an ascent to the divine, an attempt to bridge the gap between the earthly and the heavenly. With each new level, the city seemed smaller, and the stars ever closer. The wind, playing with the clay walls, seemed to whisper ancient secrets, and the dust of centuries settled on the shoulders of those who dared to look up. The greatest of these tower temples became the hallmarks of entire civilizations. In Babylon stood Etemenanki, the house where heaven and earth meet, a grand structure whose height, according to legend, reached unimaginable proportions. Its base was so broad that it seemed to have grown into the very flesh of the earth, and each successive level, narrowing, stretched ever higher, lost in the solar haze. This giant was more than just a temple. It was the center of the world, its spiritual and in many ways physical heart. Rituals were performed here, prayers were recited, and people from all corners of the kingdom flocked here to feel oneness with the gods and with each other. Another great city, boasted its own ziggurat dedicated to the moon god Nana. Its massive walls, constructed of baked brick, seemed to have absorbed millennia of light and shadow. Each brick, laid with incredible skill, carried a fragment of human labor and faith. This ziggurat was not only a home for a deity, but also a fortress of the spirit, a place where the city's inhabitants sought solace and strength in times of trial. Its stepped structure, illuminated by the rising sun, recalled the relentless movement of the heavenly bodies and the eternal cycle of life and death. In the kingdom of Assyria, at Dur-Sharukin stood a ziggurat designed to house the gods and symbolize the power of King Sargon. Its scale was staggering, and its decorations, though not fully preserved, testified to the incredible wealth and skill of its craftsmen. These were not simply temples. They were declarations of grandeur, monuments intended to perpetuate the memory of rulers and their achievements. Every stone, every tile was part of a grand design intended to demonstrate to the world the power and prosperity of the state. The construction of such structures required colossal effort, organization, and dedication. Thousands of people toiled under the scorching sun, moving clay, firing bricks, and erecting walls. Every worker, from the humble porter to the skilled architect, contributed to this grandiose undertaking. And although contemporary texts say little about the individual builders, their labor, their sweat, and their faith were invisibly woven into every step, every ledge. The legends surrounding these towers told of incredible efforts, miraculous events, and divine intervention that enabled the completion of the construction. Ziggurats were more than just architectural masterpieces. They were the centers of the universe for their creators. All life passed in their shadow, from birth and baptism to weddings and funerals. Festivals dedicated to the gods drew huge crowds who brought gifts and offered prayers. Music, dancing, and processions all took place at the foot of the sacred towers, creating an atmosphere of celebration and unity. Priests, dressed in their special robes, conducted services and performed sacrifices, maintaining an invisible connection between the worlds of man and the gods. These temples were also observatories, places where sages observed the movements of the stars, attempting to unravel the mysteries of the universe. Astronomy and astrology were inseparable, and priests, spending nights atop ziggurats, accumulated knowledge that helped them predict the future and guide the destinies of kingdoms. They saw signs of divine will in the movements of the planets, and their predictions, often vague and ambiguous, had a profound influence on the decisions of rulers and the lives of ordinary people. The greatest ziggurats of Mesopotamia, such as Etemenanki, the ziggurat of Ur, and the temples of Dur-Sharukin, represented the pinnacle of this architectural and spiritual aspiration. They symbolized the triumph of the human spirit, its ability to realize even its boldest dreams. These towers, soaring to the sky, were a testament to the might of the civilizations that built them, an embodiment of their faith, their ambition, and their relentless pursuit of perfection. They stood like beacons, illuminating the path for future generations, demonstrating what man can achieve when his work and his faith merge. In their shadow, on the plains of Mesopotamia, human history reached one of its most majestic peaks, leaving a trail that seemed to reach the stars. But greatness, no matter how grandiose it may seem, is not eternal. Even the strongest walls built with faith and perseverance can succumb to the onslaught of time and circumstance. The heavens, which once seemed so benevolent, sometimes became silent, leaving people alone with their fears and doubts. These times became the first, most severe tests of faith. It all began with a barely perceptible whisper of alarm. The heat that had once caressed the fields now turned into a scorching breath, scorching the delicate shoots of the earth. Rivers, the nurses of life, had run dry, leaving only damp traces on the parched bottoms. The land, once fertile, groaned under the weight of drought, and dust, raised by the merciless wind, obscured the horizon like a shroud. Fields that only yesterday had promised a bountiful harvest were now lifeless expanses covered in cracked clay. Famine, that ancient and merciless enemy, had begun its slow but inexorable march. Then came other disasters. The sky seemed to open, pouring torrents of water onto the earth, transforming fertile valleys into raging rivers. Floods washed away homes and livestock, claiming lives. It was a natural disaster beyond human control, yet bringing with it fear and despair. And sometimes men came with swords and spears, bringing destruction and grief. Wars, cruel and bloody, devastated cities bringing death and grief. The enemy would emerge from the battlefield with flaming torches, and everything dear to them would crumble in an instant. In those dark hours, when the sun seemed hidden behind clouds and the stars offered no solace, people turned their gaze to the ziggurats. These majestic structures, once symbols of grandeur and hope, now became their last refuge. Their massive walls, seemingly indestructible, gave a sense of security. People sought them not so much for physical shelter as for spiritual support. On the steps of the ziggurats, beneath a silent sky, prayers were offered. Voices filled with despair and supplication rose to the heights, hoping to be heard. The priests, guardians of ancient knowledge, redoubled their efforts. They performed sacrifices, attempting to appease the gods whose favor seemed lost. They performed rituals, cast spells, seeking answers in the movements of the celestial bodies, in the flight of birds, in every rustle of the wind. But answers didn't always come. The silence of the heavens was the hardest test. When drought parched the land and the enemy stood at the gates and prayers seemed unanswered, faith began to waver. It was a time of doubt, a time when people began to ask questions. Why did the gods turn away? What did we do wrong? Had all our efforts, all our aspirations been in vain? At these moments, the ziggurats became not only homes for the gods, but also fortresses of the human spirit. People gathered at their feet to find solace in one another, to share their pain and their hope. They recalled former times, times of abundance and peace, and this memory gave them strength. They believed that disasters were temporary, that the sun would rise again, and that the gods would return. These trials, no matter how severe, shaped the character of the people. They taught humility, fortitude, and mutual support. They demonstrated that even in the darkest times, the human spirit is capable of perseverance, of finding the strength to fight, and of not losing hope. The ziggurats that survived these storms became witnesses to this indomitable will, silent guardians preserving the memory of each day of suffering. And when the storm passed and the sky cleared again, the people turned to their gods with renewed vigor, their faith forged in the fire of trials, only growing stronger. They knew that the path to heaven is not always paved with roses, and that true strength lies not in the absence of difficulties, but in the ability to overcome them. Time seemed to slow, frozen in anticipation. A whisper of change, barely perceptible, like the movement of a shadow on a clay wall, began to permeate the very foundations of life. The ancient gods, whose faces were carved in stone and sculpted in clay, still occupied their places in majestic temples, but their power, their unshakable influence, began to fade. The change of dynasties brought with them not only new laws and boundaries, but also new beliefs, new voices whispering of different truths. The influence of foreign lands and the trade routes that connected once disparate peoples brought not only goods, but also ideas. And these ideas, like seeds sown on fertile soil, began to sprout, taking root in people's hearts. New cults, unfamiliar rituals promising a different salvation, a different closeness to the divine, attracted those who felt that the old paths no longer led to the light. Ziggurats, those stepped towers that once soared to the very sky, preserved the memory of a time when the connection with the gods seemed direct and unquestionable. But now, as new gods asserted themselves, the old temples began to change their purpose. Some of them, built with such love and such a desire for eternity, began to fall into disrepair. The wind blew through the empty niches where statues of deities once stood, and dust covered the altars where ancient rites were performed. Other ziggurats, however, were not abandoned. They were being rebuilt, adapted to new trends. Their steps, once serving as stairways to heaven, could now lead to new shrines consecrated by different names. The priests, guardians of ancient knowledge, watched these changes with alarm. They saw their world, a world built on the solid foundation of faith, begin to crumble. Like a boat caught in a calm bay after a storm, people's lives took on a new, calmer, but less majestic rhythm. Great cities, whose power was inextricably linked to the grandeur of their temples, began to feel the weight of passing time. The Golden Age seemed to be giving way to twilight. The architectural masterpieces erected with such labor and such faith gradually lost their original significance. Their massive structures, once inspiring awe and reverence, could now seem like mere witnesses to the past, monuments to a bygone era. In their majestic but deserted halls, where hymns once resounded and solemn rites were performed, only the echo of footsteps and the rustle of the wind could now be heard. This change of eras was not sudden, like a lightning strike. It was like a slow sunset, when the colors of the sky gradually fade, giving way to a velvety darkness. Cultural influences like the waters of a river gradually changed their course, eroding old banks and creating new ones. New beliefs coming from without brought with them different images of the divine, different promises, different paths to salvation. People living in these changing times felt this transformation in their souls. Some clung to old traditions, to familiar rituals, to the familiar faces of the gods. Others, open to new things, found in new cults answers to questions that the old faith could no longer provide. It was a period of uncertainty, a period of searching, when the past was not yet forgotten and the future was not yet clear. Ziggurats, these monumental structures whose history spanned centuries, sometimes even millennia, became symbols of this era of change. They stood like guardians of time, reminders of past grandeur, while simultaneously bearing witness to new realities. Their steps, which once led to the gods, could now seem like a path leading back to a time when faith was strong and the heavens seemed closer. Some of these ancient temples, abandoned by their clergy and parishioners, began to slowly crumble under the onslaught of the elements. Rain, wind, and the scorching sun all left their marks on their ancient walls. The clay from which they were built gradually crumbled, returning to the earth from which it had been taken. Other ziggurats, those that were rebuilt, took on a new appearance. Their forms might remain the same, but their inner content changed. New gods took the place of the old. New rituals were performed on their altars. It was a time when the old did not disappear entirely, but rather transformed, woven into the new fabric of history. During this period, when the great empires that built the ziggurats were losing their power and new powers were rising to replace them, these majestic structures became silent witnesses to decline and rebirth. They witnessed the passing of generations, the fading of entire civilizations, yet they themselves remained standing, a reminder of the strength of the human spirit and its relentless striving for something greater. Ziggurat, once the heart of cities and the pulse of faith, were now becoming something else. They were turning into relics, monuments to a bygone era. Their grandeur, once inspiring fear and awe, now evoked more nostalgia and wistfulness. This decline, this fading of its former glory, was not the end. It was merely another stage in the endless cycle of history. Time, as always, did not stand still. It flowed, bringing with it new challenges, new discoveries, new meanings. And even in the silence of the fading churches, in the whisper of change, the seed of the future was sown, the seed of new stories yet to be written. Empires that once raised their proud towers to the sun began to decline. The wind that once fluttered the banners of conquerors now merely rustled across the scorched earth, carrying away the dust of past victories. Cracks appeared on the clay tablets that held the wisdom of the ages, like wrinkles on the face of an ancient man. History, like a river, changed its course, leaving behind its ancient banks. The great ziggurats, whose steps led to the heavens, began to lose their former radiance. The sky, which had once seemed so close, was now silent. Conquerors came and went, leaving behind ash and destruction. Their swords, glittering in the sun, could not stop the passage of time, could not restore their former glory. Cities, once teeming with life, sank into silence. The streets where people hurried became deserted. Only the wind wandered through them, playing with the fragments of former glory. The elements, too, were not kind to the works of human hands. Centuries of rain eroded the foundations. The sun, scorching the earth, dried the clay, turning it to dust. Earthquakes, shaking the world, turned majestic structures into heaps of rubble. Ziggurats, meant to stand forever as symbols of divine power, began to crumble, disintegrate, returning to the earth from which they had once been taken. When the great civilizations that erected these grandiose structures exhausted themselves, when their peoples scattered like seeds carried by the wind, the ziggurats stood alone. They were silent witnesses to bygone eras. Their stone hearts ceased to beat in unison with the hearts of men. The temples, once filled with the sounds of prayers and chants, were now filled only with the whisper of the wind and the creaking of birds' wings. But even in desolation, in ruin, in oblivion, the ziggurats retained their mystery. Their shadows, lengthening at sunset, seemed like ghosts of the past. Every stone, every step, every fragment held the memory of those who built them, who prayed at their foot, who saw in them a connection between the earthly and the heavenly. Traces in the clay, erased by time, spoke of life, of faith, of man's striving for the stars. The human hand that once erected these walls now tore them down or simply passed them by, oblivious to their former grandeur. One people was replaced by another with its own gods, its own beliefs, its own building. The old temples ceased to be centers of life. They turned into ruins, evidence of oblivion. It seemed as if time erased all traces of what had been created. But what remains when the creators are gone? When empires crumble, when cities become empty, when great structures turn to dust, an echo remains. An echo of voices, an echo of footsteps, an echo of prayers. A memory remains imprinted in stone, in clay, in legends. Even when ziggurats crumbled into piles of rubble, they did not vanish without a trace. They became part of the earth, part of history, part of our collective consciousness. These ancient towers, once a bridge between worlds, now themselves became a bridge between the past and the present. They reminded us of the fragility of all earthly things, the transience of human life, but also of the soul's unquenchable yearning for something eternal, something higher. Even in their destruction, the ziggurats continued to speak. They spoke of the power of faith, the might of the human spirit, and the eternal search for meaning. The wind, sweeping over the ruins, seemed to turn the pages of an ancient book. The sun, illuminating them, seemed to be trying to awaken them from a long slumber. But the ziggurats remained silent, guarding their secrets. They were monuments to a bygone era, but also a reminder that even after the deepest oblivion, traces of the past remain. They wait to be found, to be heard, to be understood, and then perhaps history will begin to tell its most astonishing stories anew. Silence precedes change, and time begins to flow more quickly once more. It seemed as if the great structures that once reached the heavens had sunk into the abyss of oblivion, swallowed by the sands and dust of centuries. The empires that erected them crumbled like pottery shards, their rulers becoming mere names on half-erased cuneiform tablets. The people whose prayers echoed along the steps of the ziggurats had long since turned to dust. The land on which these monuments stood was covered in a new layer of history, concealing evidence of past greatness. And yet, through the thickness of time, through the veil of oblivion, a faint but persistent light shone through. A light that ignited curiosity in the hearts of people living far from these places and times. It was the light of hope that the past does not vanish without a trace, that even the most forgotten stories can be heard again.
And then they appeared.
People driven not so much by a thirst for gold as by an insatiable desire to understand. They walked a land where life had once teemed, where gods descended upon mortals and kings raised their voices to the stars. Archaeologists. They were history's detectives, seekers of lost truths, those who could read messages written not in ink, but in stone and clay. The first excavations were like the slow awakening of a sleeping giant. Shovels and brushes carefully probed the earth, revealing what had been buried for millennia. Fragments of pottery were revealed, darkened by time, but preserving patterns crafted by the hands of ancient artisans. They found shards with inscriptions that had yet to be deciphered, but which in themselves were voices from the past. Each discovered artifact was like a mosaic piece that needed to be fitted into the overall picture. Armed with knowledge and patience, scientists assembled these fragments. They studied shapes, materials, and styles. They compared finds from different sites, searching for patterns and attempting to recreate lost connections. When the outlines of brickwork emerged amid the sand and debris, the heart sank with anticipation. It could be the base of a wall, part of a foundation, or perhaps even a step. Step by step, centimeter by centimeter, they unearthed what had once been part of a grand whole. They uncovered the foundations of ziggurats that once soared into the sky. These massive blocks, laid with incredible precision, spoke of the colossal effort expended in their construction. They found the remains of staircases that led upward to sacred heights. Even when these staircases were destroyed, their outlines remained, like ghostly wayfinders. They found clay tablets covered in cuneiform, describing rituals, festivals, and the names of gods and kings. These texts were keys opening doors to a world that had seemed long closed. Particularly exciting were the discoveries related to the ziggurat towers themselves. When archaeologists began excavating the sites where, according to ancient texts, these structures once stood, they encountered enormous mounds of broken brick and earth. These were not just ruins, but evidence of complete destruction. But even in this chaos, scientists could discern traces of the former architecture. They determined the dimensions of the foundations, studied the remains of the walls, and attempted to understand the interior layout. They often found fragments of glazed tiles that once adorned the walls, sparkling in the sun. These vibrant fragments, despite their small size, brought back to the world the colors of ancient structures. They reconstructed the appearance of ziggurats not only from physical remains, but also from written evidence. Ancient chronicles, letters, and religious texts all became sources of information. The towers' sizes, their number of levels, the materials from which they were built, even their color were described. Archaeologists compared these descriptions with what they found underground, and, as if piecing together a complex puzzle, they began to see majestic images before them. They reconstructed the ziggurat in Ur, its monumental walls, its stepped form reaching toward the sky. They imagined how the Etemenanke ziggurat in Babylon dominated the city, its sheer size staggering the imagination. These excavations weren't just work, they were a true revelation. Every new find, every deciphered word, every reconstructed architectural fragment, all of it brought a sense of connection to a great history. It was as if a hand were reaching out from the depths of time, bringing forgotten knowledge. Scholars, standing among the excavated walls, could almost hear the hum of life that once throbbed around these sacred sites. They could imagine the processions marching to the temple, the sounds of music, the scent of incense. It was a return to our roots, to an understanding of how our ancestors saw the world, how they reached for the stars,
how they built bridges between the mundane and the divine. Ziggurats, once forgotten and destroyed, now regained their significance.
They ceased to be mere piles of stones and became symbols, carriers of information, keys to understanding human civilization. The discovery of these forgotten pages of history was as if the sun rose after a long, dark night, illuminating the world with a new, wondrous light. It was a revelation that allowed us to see the past not as a collection of facts, but as a living, breathing history full of wisdom and a striving for perfection. And these ancient towers, erected to connect with the heavens, now served us living in the distant future, as a bridge to ourselves, to our roots, to our eternal need for meaning and the sublime. Silence precedes change, and time begins to flow more quickly once again.
A symbol that has endured the ages, the ziggurat in culture and art. Memory, like a quiet stream, breaks through the sands of oblivion, nourishing the roots of our understanding.
Amidst ruins that whisper the stories of bygone eras, the ziggurat rises not only as a monument to architectural thought, but also as an eternal source of inspiration. Its stepped forms, like precious stones set in the crown of time, continue to shine in the imaginations of artists and writers. Imagine a canvas on which a master brushes not just a structure, but an entire universe. The heaven-touching peaks of these ancient towers become symbols of man striving for the highest, for knowledge of the unknown. In literature, ziggurats take on new life. They become mysterious places where ancient knowledge is hidden, where worlds meet, where the voices of ancestors resound. Their silhouettes, outlined against the sunset sky, imbue narratives with mysticism and depth. They become the backdrop for epic tales, witnesses to great battles and quiet revelations. Architects, drawing inspiration from these ancient monuments, create modern buildings that echo the stepped forms, symbolizing growth, development, and ascent. These structures, even in their modern interpretation, bear the imprint of ancient wisdom, reminding us of the continuity of human exploration. Consider how the step pyramid, a distant relative of the ziggurat, rises above the desert, drawing the eye and prompting reflection on the power of design and the tenacity of the hands that created it. The symbolism of stepped structures permeates other cultures, taking on new forms while preserving the original meaning. It can be a stairway to paradise, a path to enlightenment, or a hierarchy of existence. The ziggurat thus becomes a universal symbol, intuitively understood across time and place. It lives in our consciousness as an image, an idea, a reminder that humanity has always strived for something greater than everyday reality. Its images, as if imprinted on clay tablets, are passed down from generation to generation, enriching our culture. These are not simply stones stacked one on top of the other. They are bridges spanning the chasm of time, connecting us with those who lived long before us.
Ziggurats teach us to look up, to see the stars, to dream the impossible.
They remind us that even in ruins there is beauty, and in oblivion, memory. These ancient towers, once centers of life and faith, now live on in our imaginations as eternal companions of human history, as beacons pointing the way to self-understanding. Their quiet whisper, reaching us from the depths of centuries, fills our souls with peace and wisdom, reminding us that true greatness lies not in destruction, but in creation, not in fleeting glory, but in the eternal search for meaning. The memory of the ziggurats, like a precious legacy, continues to illuminate our path. reminding us of humanity's inexhaustible striving for the heavens, for knowledge, for eternity. These ancient structures, having survived so many eras, continue to speak to us, offering their lessons, their symbols, their enduring beauty, woven into the fabric of our collective consciousness. Their images, like imprints on clay, remain with us, reminding us of the past and inspiring the future. Thus, the ziggurat, a symbol that has endured the ages, continues to live, breathe, and influence us, even when its stones have long since turned to dust. Its grandeur remains in memory, in art, in the soul's yearning for the unknown, for that which lies beyond the visible world. It is an eternal echo resonating through the millennia, reminding us of who we were and who we can become. And this memory, like stardust, settles on our hearts, illuminating the path to understanding the deepest mysteries of existence. The ziggurat is more than just a structure. It is the key to understanding human nature, its eternal yearning for the transcendent, its inextinguishable striving for light. It lives on in our dreams, in our creations, in the quiet contemplation of the starry sky, in every step we take toward the unknown. And this legacy, priceless and eternal, continues to inspire us, reminding us that a true connection with the higher is possible if only we dare to raise our gaze and reach for the stars. This memory, like an ancient river, nourishes the roots of our existence, reminding us that we are part of something greater than our own lives, that we are the heirs of a great history full of wonders and accomplishments. The ziggurat, a symbol that has endured the ages, lives on in our hearts as an eternal reminder of the human striving for the heavens, for knowledge, for eternity. Its images, like starlight, penetrate the depths of time, illuminating our path and inspiring new achievements. Thus, ancient towers live on in our consciousness, reminding us that even after the passing of their creators, their ideas and aspirations can live on, inspiring new generations. They become not just historical artifacts, but living symbols that enrich our culture and our understanding of the world. This memory, like a precious stone cut by time, shines through the centuries, reminding us of the greatness of the human spirit. And this radiance continues to illuminate our path, guiding us to new horizons of knowledge and creativity. The ziggurat, a symbol that has endured the ages, lives on in our hearts, in our dreams, in every aspiration for the better, for the higher, for understanding the unknown. Its image, majestic and mysterious, will forever remain in the treasury of human memory, a testament to the soul's unquenchable yearning for the stars. And this aspiration, like the pulse of life itself, continues to beat in our hearts, inspiring us to new achievements and new discoveries. Thus the ziggurat, having survived the centuries, continues to live, inspiring and reminding us that the human striving for the highest is an eternal force that will never fade. Its images, like echoes of ancient hymns, they resound in our souls, reminding us that we are part of a great history that continues today. And this history, full of wisdom and beauty, continues to inspire us to new achievements. The ziggurat is a symbol that lives within us, in our quest for knowledge, in our desire to touch eternity. Its stepped form is a metaphor for our spiritual growth, our ascent to the light. And this ascent, like the movement of stars across the night sky, never ceases. Thus, the ziggurat, a symbol that has survived the centuries, lives on, reminding us that even in the ruins of the past lies great wisdom that can illuminate our present and future. Its images, like the quiet whisper of the wind, reach us through the millennia, bearing the imprint of ancient beliefs and eternal aspirations. And this heritage, priceless and inexhaustible, continues to nourish our souls, guiding us to comprehend the deepest mysteries of existence. The ziggurat is more than just a structure. It is a bridge between worlds, between the past and the future, between the earthly and the divine. It lives in our imagination, in our dreams, in every striving for perfection. And this striving, like an unquenchable flame, continues to burn in our hearts, illuminating the path to knowledge and spiritual growth. Thus the ziggurat, symbol that has endured the ages, lives on, inspiring us with its majestic simplicity and profound meaning. Its images, like reflections of stars in water, shimmer in our consciousness, reminding us that humanity has always strived for light, for knowledge, for eternity. And this striving, like the flow of a river, will never dry up. Thus the ziggurat, a symbol that has endured through the ages, lives on, reminding us that even in the ruins of the past lies great wisdom that can illuminate our present and future. Its images, like the quiet whisper of the wind, reach us through the millennia, bearing the imprint of ancient beliefs and eternal aspirations. And this heritage, priceless and inexhaustible, continues to nourish our souls, guiding us to comprehend the deepest mysteries of existence. The ziggurat is more than just a structure. It is a bridge between worlds, between the past and the future, between the earthly and the divine. It lives in our imagination, in our dreams, in our every striving for perfection. And this striving, like an unquenchable flame, continues to burn in our hearts, illuminating the path to knowledge and spiritual growth. Thus, the ziggurat, a symbol that has endured through the ages, lives on, inspiring us with its majestic simplicity and profound meaning. His images, like reflections of stars in water, shimmer in our consciousness, reminding us that humanity has always strived for light, for knowledge, for eternity. And this desire, like the flow of a river, will never dry up. In our pursuit of knowledge, in our desire to touch eternity, its stepped form is a metaphor for our spiritual growth, our ascent toward the light. And this ascent, like the movement of stars across the night sky, never ceases. Thus the ziggurat, a symbol that has endured through the ages, lives on, reminding us that even in the ruins of the past lies great wisdom that can illuminate our present and future. Its images, like the quiet whisper of the wind, reach us through the millennia, bearing the imprint of ancient beliefs and eternal aspirations. And this heritage, priceless and inexhaustible, continues to nourish our souls, guiding us to comprehend the deepest mysteries of existence. The ziggurat is not just a structure. It is a bridge between worlds, between the past and the future, between the earthly and the divine. It lives in our imagination, in our dreams, in our every striving for perfection. And this aspiration, like an unquenchable flame, continues to burn in our hearts, illuminating the path to knowledge and spiritual growth. Thus, the ziggurat, a symbol that has endured through the ages, lives on, inspiring us with its majestic simplicity and profound meaning. Its images, like reflections of stars in water, shimmer in our consciousness, reminding us that humanity has always strived for light, for knowledge, for eternity. And this aspiration, like the flow of a river, will never dry up. Thus the ziggurat, a symbol that has endured through the ages, lives on, reminding us that even in the ruins of the past lies great wisdom that can illuminate our present and future. Its images, like the quiet whisper of the wind, reach us through the millennia, bearing the imprint of ancient beliefs and eternal aspirations. And this heritage, priceless and inexhaustible, continues to nourish our souls, guiding us to comprehend the deepest mysteries of existence. The ziggurat is more than just a structure. It is a bridge between worlds, between the past and the future, between the earthly and the divine. It lives in our imagination, in our dreams, in our every striving for perfection. And this striving, like an unquenchable flame, continues to burn in our hearts, illuminating the path to knowledge and spiritual growth. Thus, the ziggurat, a symbol that has endured through the ages, lives on, inspiring us with its majestic simplicity and profound meaning. Its images, like reflections of stars in water, shimmer in our consciousness, reminding us that humanity has always striven for light, for knowledge, for eternity. And this striving, like the flow of a river, will never dry up. In our pursuit of knowledge, in our desire to touch eternity, its stepped form is a metaphor for our spiritual growth, our ascent toward the light. And this ascent, like the movement of stars across the night sky, never ceases. Thus the ziggurat, a symbol that has endured through the ages, lives on, reminding us that even in the ruins of the past lies great wisdom that can illuminate our present and future. Its images, like the quiet whisper of the wind, reach us through the millennia, bearing the imprint of ancient beliefs and eternal aspirations. And this heritage, priceless and inexhaustible, continues to nourish our souls, guiding us to comprehend the deepest mysteries of existence. The ziggurat is not just a structure. It is a bridge between worlds, between the past and the future, between the earthly and the divine. It lives in our imagination, in our dreams, in our every striving for perfection. And this aspiration, like an unquenchable flame, continues to burn in our hearts, illuminating the path to knowledge and spiritual growth. Thus, the ziggurat, a symbol that has endured through the ages, lives on, inspiring us with its majestic simplicity and profound meaning. Its images, like reflections of stars in water, shimmer in our consciousness, reminding us that humanity has always strived for light, for knowledge, for eternity. And this aspiration, like the flow of a river, will never dry up. Thus the ziggurat, a symbol that has endured through the ages, lives on, reminding us that even in the ruins of the past lies great wisdom that can illuminate our present and future. Its images, like the quiet whisper of the wind, reach us through the millennia, bearing the imprint of ancient beliefs and eternal aspirations. And this heritage, priceless and inexhaustible, continues to nourish our souls, guiding us to comprehend the deepest mysteries of existence. The ziggurat is more than just a structure. It is a bridge between worlds, between the past and the future, between the earthly and the divine. It lives in our imagination, in our dreams, in our every striving for perfection. And this striving, like an unquenchable flame, continues to burn in our hearts, illuminating the path to knowledge and spiritual growth. Thus, the ziggurat, a symbol that has endured through the ages, lives on, inspiring us with its majestic simplicity and profound meaning. Its images, like reflections of stars in water, shimmer in our consciousness, reminding us that humanity has always striven for light, for knowledge, for eternity. And this striving, like the flow of a river, will never dry up. Bearing the imprint of ancient beliefs and eternal aspirations. And this heritage, priceless and inexhaustible, continues to nourish our souls, guiding us to comprehend the deepest mysteries of existence. The ziggurat is not just a structure. It is a bridge between worlds, between the past and the future, between the earthly and the divine. It lives in our imagination, in our dreams, in our every striving for perfection. And this striving, like an unquenchable flame, continues to burn in our hearts, illuminating the path to knowledge and spiritual growth. Thus the ziggurat, a symbol that has survived the ages, lives on, inspiring us with its majestic simplicity and profound meaning. Its images, like reflections of stars in water, shimmer in our consciousness, reminding us that humanity has always strived for light, for knowledge, for eternity. And this striving, like the flow of a river, will never dry up. Thus, the ziggurat, a symbol that has endured through the ages, lives on, reminding us that even in the ruins of the past lies great wisdom that can illuminate our present and future. Its images, like the quiet whisper of the wind, reach us through the millennia, bearing the imprint of ancient beliefs and eternal aspirations. And this heritage, priceless and inexhaustible, continues to nourish our souls, guiding us to comprehend the deepest mysteries of existence. The ziggurat is more than just a structure. It is a bridge between worlds, between the past and the future, between the earthly and the divine. It lives in our imagination, in our dreams, in our every striving for perfection. And this striving, like an unquenchable flame, continues to burn in our hearts, illuminating the path to knowledge and spiritual growth. Thus, the ziggurat, a symbol that has endured through the ages, lives on, inspiring us with its majestic simplicity and profound meaning. His images, like reflections of stars in water, shimmer in our consciousness, reminding us that humanity has always strived for light, for knowledge, for eternity. And this desire, like the flow of a river, will never dry up, bearing the imprint of ancient beliefs and eternal aspirations. And this heritage, priceless and inexhaustible, continues to nourish our souls, guiding us to comprehend the deepest mysteries of existence. The ziggurat is not just a structure. It is a bridge between worlds, between the past and the future, between the earthly and the divine. It lives in our imagination, in our dreams, in our every striving for perfection. And this striving, like an unquenchable flame, continues to burn in our hearts, illuminating the path to knowledge and spiritual growth. Thus the ziggurat, a symbol that has survived the ages, lives on, inspiring us with its majestic simplicity and profound meaning. Its images, like reflections of stars in water, shimmer in our consciousness, reminding us that humanity has always strived for light, for knowledge, for eternity. And this striving, like the flow of a river, will never dry up. Thus, the ziggurat, a symbol that has endured through the ages, lives on, reminding us that even in the ruins of the past lies great wisdom that can illuminate our present and future. Its images, like the quiet whisper of the wind, reach us through the millennia, bearing the imprint of ancient beliefs and eternal aspirations. And this heritage, priceless and inexhaustible, continues to nourish our souls, guiding us to comprehend the deepest mysteries of existence. The ziggurat is more than just a structure. It is a bridge between worlds, between the past and the future, between the earthly and the divine. It lives in our imagination, in our dreams, in our every striving for perfection. And this striving, like an unquenchable flame, continues to burn in our hearts, illuminating the path to knowledge and spiritual growth. Thus, the ziggurat, a symbol that has endured through the ages, lives on, inspiring us with its majestic simplicity and profound meaning. His images, like reflections of stars in water, shimmer in our consciousness, reminding us that humanity has always strived for light, for knowledge, for eternity. And this desire, like the flow of a river, will never dry up, which can illuminate our present and future. Its images, like the quiet whisper of the wind, reach us through millennia, bearing the imprint of ancient beliefs and eternal aspirations. And this heritage, priceless and inexhaustible, continues to nourish our souls, guiding us to comprehend the deepest mysteries of existence. The ziggurat is more than just a structure. It is a bridge between worlds, between the past and the future, between the earthly and the divine. It lives in our imagination, in our dreams, in our every striving for perfection. And this striving, like an unquenchable flame, continues to burn in our hearts, illuminating the path to knowledge and spiritual growth. Thus, the ziggurat, a symbol that has endured the ages, lives on, inspiring us with its majestic simplicity and profound meaning. His images, like reflections of stars in water, shimmer in our consciousness, reminding us that humanity has always strived for light, for knowledge, for eternity. And this desire, like the flow of a river, will never dry up, which can illuminate our present and future. Its images, like the quiet whisper of the wind, reach us through millennia, bearing the imprint of ancient beliefs and eternal aspirations. And this heritage, priceless and inexhaustible, continues to nourish our souls, guiding us to comprehend the deepest mysteries of existence. The ziggurat is more than just a structure. It is a bridge between worlds, between the past and the future, between the earthly and the divine. It lives in our imagination, in our dreams, in our every striving for perfection. And this striving, like an unquenchable flame, continues to burn in our hearts, illuminating the path to knowledge and spiritual growth. Thus, the ziggurat, a symbol that has endured the ages, lives on, inspiring us with its majestic simplicity and profound meaning. His images, like reflections of stars in water, shimmer in our consciousness, reminding us that humanity has always strived for light, for knowledge, for eternity. And this desire, like the flow of a river, will never dry up. The sand crunches beneath our feet like the whisper of forgotten names. A wind carrying the dust of millennia caresses the contours of ancient stones, and it seems as if history itself is lifting the curtain, allowing us to peer into the depths of bygone eras. We stand on the threshold of a new day, where lessons learned from the dust illuminate our path. What do we learn today, standing at the foot of these giants whose peaks once touched the stars? We learn above all of man's relentless striving for the highest. This impulse, born at the dawn of time, is like the first ray of sunlight breaking through the darkness of night. It compelled the first farmers of Mesopotamia to peer into the firmament, seeking signs and answers in the shimmer of distant luminaries. Their gaze, directed upward, was filled with awe and hope. From humble mounds of earth, intended to bring them closer to the gods, they moved on to the construction of majestic adobe structures, the first steps to heaven. This was the beginning of a great journey, a journey paved with faith and daring. We learn about the birth of the idea of the ziggurat, a unique creation of human genius. Unlike the temples of other peoples, sunken into the earth or soaring upward with a single tower, the ziggurat was a stepped mountain, a staircase connecting worlds. Each step, like a step toward the divine, led ever higher. And the choice of location for these shrines was no accident. On the endless plains of Mesopotamia, where the horizon merged with the sky, the ziggurat became the only vertical accent, a beacon visible from afar. It seemed to grow from the earth itself, personifying the connection between the world of man and the abode of the gods. We learn that the ziggurat was the heart of the city, the pulse of community life. It not only housed the gods, but also served as an invisible link between them and the people. Its architecture, sometimes astonishing in its scale, was governed by strict logic and profound symbolism. Available materials, clay, brick, bitumen, were used, but the skill of the builders transformed them into eternal monuments. Its walls, clad in bright glazed tiles, reflected the sun, and at the top, in the sanctuary, offerings to the gods were kept. Community life revolved around the temple. Feasts, sacrifices, prayers all took place in its shadow, filling the air with awe and hope. We learn about the mystical role of priests, keepers of knowledge and intermediaries with the gods. They were not simply clerics, but also scientists, philosophers, and astronomers. They were entrusted with observing the stars, studying their movements, and predicting eclipses. This knowledge, passed down from generation to generation, was sacred. Ziggurats, with their high platforms, served as ideal observatories. Astrological predictions based on these observations had a profound impact on the destinies of rulers and the entire people. They were sought for answers to questions about the future, consolation, and protection. We learn of times of triumph when ziggurats reached their greatest splendor. The Tower of Babel and Etemenanke, soaring to the heavens, became a symbol of power and ambition. The temples of and Dur-Sharukin, each one testified to the flourishing of civilizations, their strength and wealth. The stories of their construction, shrouded in legend, told of the labor of thousands, the desire to surpass their predecessors, and the desire to imprint their greatness for centuries. These majestic structures served not only religious purposes but also embodied the power of states, their ability to unite and create. But we also learn of trials of faith, of times when the heavens seemed silent. Natural disasters, droughts, floods, earthquakes, lashed the lands of Mesopotamia, bringing famine and destruction. Wars and conquests brought suffering and destroyed the established order. In such moments, ziggurats became not only sanctuaries, but also fortresses of the spirit. People sought solace in prayer, appealed to the gods for help, and made sacrifices hoping for their mercy. Faith became a support in difficult times, a beacon illuminating the path through the darkness. We learn of the whispers of change, of how new gods and old temples met in the flow of history. The change of dynasties, cultural influences, the arrival of new peoples, all of this inevitably affected religious life. New cults, new beliefs interacted with ancient traditions. Some ziggurats fell into disrepair, their majestic forms gradually crumbling. Others were rebuilt, adapted to new needs while preserving their stepped form and their symbolic meaning. It was a natural process, part of the endless dance of life and change. We learn of oblivion and decay as the traces in the clay were gradually erased by time. Conquests, the decline of once mighty civilizations, all of this led to the desolation of once majestic structures. Wind and rain, sun and frost, and sometimes even the human hand, seeking to use ancient stones for new constructions, all contributed to this slow but inexorable decay.
Ziggurats fell into ruin, their once shining walls hidden under layers of sand and earth. What remains when their creators are gone?
Only the echo of their aspirations, only a memory imprinted in stone. But even in this oblivion, we find revelation. Thanks to the painstaking work of archaeologists, we can reconstruct the appearance and purpose of these forgotten towers. The first excavations, the first finds, pottery shards, clay tablets with cuneiform inscriptions, became keys opening doors to the past. Like time detectives, scholars pieced together fragments, deciphered ancient texts, and reconstructed architectural details.
Every artifact discovered, every unearthed step,
is a new page in the book of history, a new thread connecting us with those who lived millennia ago. And we learn that the ziggurat is a symbol that has endured through the ages. It lives on in our culture and art, inspiring writers, artists, and architects. Its stepped form, its symbolic meaning, a stairway to heaven, a bridge between worlds, resonates in diverse corners of the globe. It becomes a source of inspiration, a reminder of eternal human aspirations. The image of the ziggurat, like a distant star, shimmers in our consciousness, bearing the imprint of ancient beliefs and eternal quests. And today, standing here, we learn lessons from these ashes again and again. We comprehend ancient beliefs, their multifacetedness and depth. We see the history of human spirituality, its relentless pursuit of perfection, of understanding the unknown. The ziggurats remind us of the fragility of greatness, of how quickly earthly glory can vanish. But they also speak of the eternity of ideas, of the power of the human spirit, which is capable of creating and reaching for the stars, even when all around us is turning to dust. And in this tranquil contemplation, as the sun sinks toward the horizon, painting the sky in golden and crimson hues, we see the reflection of these ancient towers in the fading light. The quiet whisper of history reaches us through millennia, carrying the wisdom of the ages. Awareness of our place in this endless flow of time comes naturally, without fuss or stress. The ziggurats, these ancient guardians of time, teach us not only about the past but also about the present, granting us peace and the opportunity for deep reflection. And so, as the last ray of sun glides across the ancient stones, illuminating them with a soft, warm light, the history of the ziggurats comes to its natural end. The air fills with silence, broken only by the rustling of the wind, which seems to carry echoes of days long past.
Every crack in the clay walls, every chip in the steps,
holds the memory of thousands of years, of countless sunrises and sunsets, of prayers raised to heaven, and of the life that bubbled at the foot of these great structures. The evening glow, like an ancient artist, paints the sky with colors of tranquility. Gold fades to crimson, which in turn gives way to the deep blue velvet of the night. In this flickering light, the ancient towers seem no longer just structures, but part of nature itself, ingrained in the earth and reaching for eternity. They stand silent witnesses to rises and falls, triumphs and oblivion. We stand on the threshold of a new day, but before that moment of peace, when past and present merge. In this stillness, when the world around us stands still, we feel the breath of eternity. It is not an end, but rather a deep, peaceful exhalation of the ancient world. It reminds us that even the most magnificent human creations are subject to the passage of time, but the ideas, aspirations, and faith they embodied can live forever, like the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. The quiet whisper of history comes from the depths of time, carrying not the roar of battles or the cries of defeat, but calm, wise reflection. We recognize our place in the endless flow of time feeling a connection with those who lived before us, who built these towers, who believed in their power. In this evening, filled with peace, we find not only the memory of the past, but also a quiet confidence in the present. This is the moment when the soul finds harmony, listening to the song of eternity coming from the very heart of time. And this quiet, blessed peace remains with us like a gentle trace in clay, like the reflection of the setting sun on ancient stones.